Thank you to today's show sponsor, Azalea Orthopedics. They are a group of highly trained physicians and surgeons in East Texas that will meet all of your orthopedic needs. To learn more about Azalea Orthopedics, go to azaleaortho.com. That is azaleaortho.com. Welcome to Getting Real to Heal with Dr. Grace. I am Dr. Grace English, founder of Deep in the Heart Ministries. We are a ministry that exists to tackle the hard realities of this life through the power of Jesus Christ. He is the only one that can set us free from our addictions, our negative thoughts and emotions, and bring us the true lasting healing and peace that He wants for our lives. Welcome to Getting Real to Heal with Dr. Grace. Today's episode is entitled Healing from a Toxic Narcissistic Relationship. Over the last 10 or 15 years, I've been hearing a lot more of that word narcissist, and at first I wasn't really sure what that meant, but today we have a very special guest who knows this word very much. And I looked up the word narcissist, and it said that it's somebody who has extreme interest in themselves or admiration, and they think that the world revolves around them. Obviously, being in a narcissistic relationship can be very, very difficult. And you may have been one that was raised by a narcissistic parent. Possibly you may know somebody who's married to a narcissist. And today, Amanda Barbe, she is going to share her testimony on what that type of relationship had done early on in her life, because she did have a mother who was narcissist. And she's going to shed light onto just the damaging effects of what this relationship brings. And she's going to help us learn how to protect and free ourselves from the damaging effects of that relationship. And so Amanda, she has been married to her husband, Josh, for the last 19 years. They worked overseas in Southeast Asia for the Lord for several years before they moved to Tyler in 2020. And she is the founder of Anchors Bloom, which is a ministry where she serves others that have been through emotional abuse and trauma from a biblical perspective. And Amanda, she got her degree in theology from Howard Payne University, and she also got her Christian mental health certification from the American Association of Christian Counselors. So help me welcome Amanda to the show.
Thank you. Thanks for having me here today.
Yes, Amanda. So I want to start off first and ask you, what does a narcissistic personality look like?
So the best way that I can put it into words, it's a complex thing. It's not a very simple definition. The individual that we would consider having narcissistic traits, and it's kind of on a level, so they could have maybe a few or more.
Mm-hmm.
But all it is that individual is covering up a lot of things within them, such as shame, guilt, even emotional wounds that they haven't healed from yet. And they are putting on a fake facade, a mask, to cover up all of that that's within them, because they don't want to be vulnerable or open. So instead, they put on a narcissistic mask before other people to protect themselves. But also, their viewpoint of the world is different than a person that doesn't have a lot to cover up. Their viewpoint is, for me to get ahead in life or to be okay in life, I need to work my way to control relationships, manipulate them to get ahead and continue to hurt other people, because they themselves have received a lot of hurt, and so they think that's how the world works. But that's not always the case. There's people that are really kind and sincere and not afraid to be vulnerable and not afraid to look within themselves and get healing.
Right. So. No, that's wonderful. Well, let's start off with your childhood. What was your family of origin like?
I was raised in a home. Well, when you're young, all you know is what you're experiencing. You don't know any different. And so I didn't have this experience of my home life is not good or horrible. There were obviously times that were tense, things that even as a child I knew were not good.
Mm-hmm.
But it also shaped my worldview at a young age to think that that's just how the world works and how other families work as well. So
Exactly.
there's a lot of fear-based parenting, a lot of having to be obedient, submissive, stay in line, all of those kinds of things. But there was also other dynamics happening that as a child I wouldn't have been able to pinpoint, not understanding these things with narcissism. But overall, grew up thinking this was normal. And it wasn't until I got older that some of those personality traits that my mom has turned against me. So at the time, if you are submissive and you are compliant, there's no need for her to try to have control and all of that.
Right.
Yeah.
So would you say that early on, you and your mom did have a relationship which, from what you can remember, seemed to be somewhat healthy, as a little girl?
Yeah, based on what I knew,
Yeah.
I thought it was a very loving, good relationship. And, as I say that, I see different memories where I wasn't so certain in that. But overall, I thought everything's okay between her and I. And the dynamics between her and my stepdad and also my other sisters also wasn't as stable too. So just observing different relationships within the family unit was kind of eye-opening. But I always thought, well, I'm on her good side because I was the golden child of the narcissistic parent. And so I thought everything's okay with us. So it's okay.
It's going to be fine. But you definitely even saw it as a child growing up that the relationships were not necessarily healthy and normal. You could see some like roughness in between.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. I didn't have words to put to
describe it. Right.
I just felt, at times scared or
Right.
uncomfortable, or again, just thought this is how the world works and this is going to be a rough ride
Right.
at different times. And so that was my understanding as a child with it.
Yeah. So did y'all attend church or anything growing up, or was that?
It's interesting because my mom's mother, which is my grandmother, she's actually a PK, a preacher's child. So my great-grandfather was a pastor. But growing up, we didn't attend church consistently. It was go for Christmas, go for Easter.
Sure.
When I turned about, I think I was 10 years old, I had friends at school that told me that they went every Sunday. And I liked my experience during Easter, going to church on Sunday morning. And so I asked my mom to take us to church. And so I think that somehow either it brought to her heart that she needed to do this, or it was something that she was searching for herself at the time. She said, yeah, let's go to church. So she started taking us to church at that age. And then our world kind of turned around a little bit for the better. But again, there is a lot of things that still needed to be taken care of that weren't being taken care of.
Right. So your stepfather and your mom, they had raised you, right? Like he was considered your dad.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. So just as a young child and adolescence, when would you say you started seeing some unhealthy traits in your mom that you knew, talking with friends, going over to other people's homes, seeing their relationship with their parents, when did you get a sense of like, this is maybe something very unhealthy that, was going on between you and your mom? You just couldn't put your finger on it,
I think the first time I noticed something was really, really off was an actual experience that involved me being on the end of, I had wronged her, me and my sisters, but we didn't. And I was very confused. I think possibly I was 14 or 15 years old, and we were supposed to apologize for behavior that we didn't do. And it really bothered me because I have a very fair system in my heart. And I thought, well, what do we apologize for? And my stepdad tried to intervene and said, just apologize. And I was adamant, and I said, well, what was the behavior that we need to apologize about?
Right.
And he just wanted us to make my mom happy, not to bring understanding to what was going on. He just wanted to like push it all away.
Right.
And her response to it all wasn't very healthy at all. So I knew then that there was something wrong because we were being blamed for something going on within her world
Right.
and in her heart.
Right.
And I felt very frightened because I couldn't make her happy for the first time.
Right.
And
Okay.
even apologizing didn't really help either.
Okay. So you never did apologize because there was nothing to apologize for.
I can't remember if we actually did say we were sorry or not. I want to say we probably just did
You
apologize.
just did it just to make peace.
Just to make peace.
Yeah.
And so that was the start of a pattern that would continue on as I grew into a young adult and into college, that there would be this, you need to apologize, but not understanding why.
Okay.
And just to make the relationship have
So
move forward and work.
she would continue to kind of use you as a scapegoat for whatever was going on in her life. You know, some people,
Yes.
yeah, it basically is like, you
Mhm.
blame other people for what's going on in your life,
Yeah.
but you're not taking ownership of what's happening in your own heart. And
Yes.
it's easier to blame others than it is to
Yes.
take on your own responsibility.
Yes.
So that's why I mentioned, using you as a scapegoat, saying, hey, you're causing this grief in my life, and
Yes.
I am going to have you apologize when you're not even the problem.
Right.
And
Exactly.
so I know that had to be very hard for you growing up because you're like, this isn't right.
Right.
It just went against your fair, right and wrong kind
Yeah.
of thing.
Yeah.
And so it sounds like your stepdad, he really tried to keep some peace at the house,
Yeah.
but he really didn't have much control over your mom's words
No.
or actions and behaviors.
No.
Okay.
In his own way, he was trying to control the relationships between me, my mom, also my sisters as well, because they were also scapegoats at different times. It's a very good word, scapegoat.
Yeah.
And when she got into a place of trying to regulate her emotions, and this is what narcissists do, they can't on their own regulate their emotions. And so they need to do something to somebody else, hurt them, control them, make them, make themselves feel above that other individual, to feel good about themselves so that they can feel regulated. And then what happens is it becomes abusive, obviously, because they are lashing out at you or yelling at you or calling you names to make themselves feel better.
Right.
And you're on the other end receiving all of this toxic stuff.
Right.
And you're like, what did I do to receive this?
Right.
But as a young adult and a child, you think there was something wrong with me that I caused
for sure.
this behavior. So there was a lot of self, I would take on more than I needed to.
Right.
And I didn't learn until I got older that it was nothing to do with me.
Right.
All this behavior had everything to do with the other individual, in this case, my mom.
Right. And so you're trying to, as a young adult, you're trying to figure this out and it doesn't make any sense to you. And and you don't want to continue to be the object of her wrath or whatever it is that she's trying to control, and so how did you start kind of protecting yourself from your mom? Because obviously narcissists, I'm sure we'll talk about, hardly do they ever change.
Yeah.
Unless it
very
is a
sad.
spiritual, miraculous
Yes.
change, power of the Holy Spirit that can break that.
Right.
But apart from that, unless they submit, it's not going to happen.
Right. And there's reasons for that I could talk about later.
Mm-hmm.
But how I protected myself, I think I started off trying to understand what was going on with my mom. I dove into researching things such as bipolar disorder or just anything to make sense in my mind why this behavior was thrown at me. So when her behavior towards me personally, I can't speak for my sisters, but with my story, when I went off to college is when our relationship got really, really worse.
Okay.
So growing up, I was the golden child, but once I was trying to become my own person and be my own, learn about my interests, my likes, being my own self, she didn't like that.
Your own voice.
Yeah. She wanted me to be an extension of her. And so she wanted to control what I studied, and she wanted me to, go to her before I make any decision, even though I was financially independent in school. And so it was a lot of, I would call it a power struggle between her and I whenever I would come home from school.
Right.
Normally, college students and parents do have somewhat of a power struggle. That some of that is normal, but this was taken to a whole different level. And there was behaviors that were done that I'm not going to share here, but would be considered very abusive in nature. And so to protect myself from those moments, and again, I didn't even understand what I had done wrong because there was no explanation. It was, she's just angry with me, and she would throw things at me and project onto me what she thought was wrong with me, but what really wasn't the case. And so it really caused me to feel a little bit kind of crazy in my mind. So I started to pull away physically when I could. So I would fill my summers up with extra jobs or extra classes because going home was starting to become more and more unsafe as a young adult. And then I would start talking to other individuals about their family lives. And that's when I became really curious. How do your parents treat you as a college student? And how did they treat you when you were in high school? And then everything started to become clear that, whoa, this is not healthy. And I have a lot to be concerned about with this dynamic of our relationship. And so at the time, I didn't go to a real counselor, but I sought counsel with older women and with my friends, and continued to do more research. But to protect myself, just kind of stayed away as much as I could, though the relationship still existed, because there is also what is called a trauma bond that narcissists do with those that they exert their behaviors with, their power over. And so there was this, I have to stay in this relationship because if I don't, she's going to crumble. And there was a very codependent relationship that we had for a very, very long time. And so for me to pull out of it, I would feel a lot of guilt.
Yes. I can see that. But for 2 decades, you thought you were the one that was the problem.
Yes.
And then
probably more than
when you got into college, finally, you realize, okay, I may not have been the perfect child, but I definitely did not deserve to have all of the verbal and emotional abuse, that has happened between us. And so your eyes started to get opened, and you started, I don't even know if you knew there was a term for your mom's, personality.
It took me a while to figure out the word, and it wasn't until after I was married and a lot of back and forth in the relationship. There would be a relationship, there wouldn't be a relationship. She would end it, or I would end it, because it would just be very painful, and it would just be back and forth. And that kind of cycle in any relationship dynamic is not healthy. And it does impact.
Oh, it's exhausting.
It's very exhausting. It caused me a lot of mental health challenges and anxiety, depression, all of those things. When my husband and I, we were serving overseas, and when we returned back from serving overseas, I was experiencing some of that mental health stuff. That was coupled with things of just living abroad and the stress of that. And when we came back, I was still struggling. Her behavior would ramp up because she thought she needed to exert more control. You haven't been here, so now I need to be more passive aggressive and more controlling. And so she tried all these different ways to control me. But I was watching some videos one evening and struggling in my heart about this relationship and this, God, what do I do? What do I do? I prayed for her and prayed for her and prayed for her. And I asked, Lord, reveal to me what I need to change. Because, again, you take responsibility when it's not your own. And I saw a Dr. Phil show
Mm-hmm.
on, I think it was like a YouTube
Mm-hmm.
scroll, just scrolling through. And the title of the video was, "Why Does My Mom Hate Me?"
Hmm.
So
Okay.
I was
Interesting.
like, that's a question that I actually have inside of my heart. So I clicked on the video, and that's when I learned about the word narcissism.
Wow.
And the way that this mom on the TV was being interviewed with her daughters, their relationship dynamic, I was like relating every part of it. I related to it, and my heart broke. So I got off that show, and then I started doing research on narcissism. And I had always thought that narcissism was somebody that was just like you guys said earlier, just enamored with themselves. And so that's what is called grandiose narcissism.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a very real thing. And there's other types of narcissism that will look differently in different individuals. And with my mom, it looked different than the grandiose. It was harder to pinpoint, and it would be called or considered like a covert narcissist.
Okay.
So it's harder to figure out what's going on.
Right.
But I started doing all this research, and it was the start of me diving into just this world of other individuals coming out of their relationships with parents that were narcissistic and different, dynamics that they had to figure out and learn and recover from.
Right.
But after realizing that, I broke and cried for about 2 hours of realizing I'm dealing with something that is beyond what I can.
So those tears and just the crying and all of that, were they kind of also tears of relief, knowing that you actually
Yes
kind of
and no.
had, a community of other people who also have experienced the same type of
I think
abusive relationship?
at that time, because that community was online, so I didn't have that connection in person, and it was very new. It wasn't very widely talked about like it is now. So that was back in 2000 and I want to say 2013. So there weren't a lot of books about it.
Right.
It was discussed, but it wasn't very much in the mainstream as it is now. Now it's like you can find it everywhere, which is really good. So I felt kind of isolated, a little alone in it. I did have relief of, okay, I think I can pinpoint this now. But I still, at the time, 2013, I still stuffed it down because I didn't want to face it and deal with it or deal with the wounds that was created by that personality disorder. So it was a lot of me being triggered when I discovered what was going on, and I was like, I'm not ready to heal.
Yes. I
I'm
get
not
it.
ready
Yeah.
to deal with this.
Yeah.
And then I had a fear that I was also repeating narcissistic traits as well in my life, because you learn patterns. You don't mean to, you just pick it up. This is how you're raised, and you turn around and you become this as well. So I went through this whole period of self-reflection and asking the Lord to draw things out of me that I learned that were not healthy. And he started to reveal to me, this behavior that you have with this person or with your husband, it was learned and it wasn't correct, and we're going to pull it out.
Okay.
And I didn't know it was wrong behavior.
Right.
I thought it was normal behavior. And so
Right.
I think the same with my mom. I think she learned some of the behavior growing up in her household. So she didn't know it was necessarily all the time wrong behavior. Some of it, yes, I think she had to know. But the other behaviors, I think, is learned and not shared, that this is wrong.
Right.
And you not to behave. You need to not behave like this. And so a lot of it for me personally, just being vulnerable, was I was really good at manipulating my husband. So that wasn't a good thing. And also being easily offended. And
yeah. So the Lord told you that those are things that he can help you change. And so when you were online and you did see this, then you just realized, you have all these hurts that you have buried for so many years, and it can definitely be so overwhelming, because you're like, oh my gosh, how long is this going to take, God, And it can take days, months, years.
For me, it was years.
And God has a way of unraveling each layer one by one.
Yeah, he does. He's very faithful.
Yes, he's very faithful, and he's very gracious, and he's not going to make you do everything all at once, because we couldn't.
Right.
There's no way we couldn't.
It would destroy us. Yeah.
Right. And so Amanda, you obviously became a believer at some point because God was definitely very
Definitely. Yeah.
crucial in your life
I
in
mean,
opening your eyes
I
to
came
all
to
of
know
this.
him. I chose to follow Jesus at like the age of 10. And then when I was 12, I got baptized.
Okay, good.
And I had a really close relationship with him. And I think it became close because I had nowhere else to go, nowhere to
Oh,
run to. So the Lord was
yes.
my counselor for a very, very long time. And that is the best counselor.
Wow, yes.
And he held me in the times when I didn't know what was going on and I was confused.
Right.
And, he was there in the valley with me. So I got to have this really tight relationship with him as a result of all of this. So there is good
There's
that
good.
comes out of these kinds of situations.
There
So,
is, but you're just, you're reading your Bible, you're praying,
yeah,
you don't know what's going on. You have
yeah,
no control over what's going on in your household.
right.
But, the Lord's speaking to you and telling you and, protecting you and those wounds. I mean, the Bible does talk about how words can be so reckless. And
Yeah.
even though that person may say they're sorry later on, it's hard sometimes
Yeah.
to forget those words. Like, I
Yeah.
remember some words that
Yes,
were
yes,
told
yes.
me when I was a little girl
Yeah.
that I wish I didn't remember. I'm not mad anymore and I have forgiven,
Yeah.
but they hurt. They
Yeah.
hurt. But like, we're going to talk some more. So many times people who are wounded, they wound others.
Yes. Yes.
And so I know it was coming from a place of pain and their own issues and how they have to lash out and control other people to
Yeah.
keep their facade up that everything's fine and
Yeah. They don't want to fall apart.
right.
That's the thing. I think a narcissist, it's called when they become more vulnerable or there's a word for it. I can't remember it, but they go through cycles. And if they fall apart, they don't like that place of brokenness.
Okay.
They don't like to be vulnerable or broken. So they have to, rebuild their ego.
Yeah.
And in doing so, harming other people is the easiest way to rebuild that ego. And, but the Lord,
It's protection though.
yeah,
That
they're
it's a
protecting.
defense
Yes,
mechanism.
it's a defense mechanism instead of really trusting God with their brokenness and their
Right. Right. Exactly.
and allowing him to transform them and to
Well,
get healing.
your hearts get very cold and they get very
Yes.
hardened.
Yes, if you don't get healing, yes.
Yeah, if you don't. And, that pours out into your family life, your children, all of
Yes.
that. And so you knew that you didn't want to continue that generational,
Right.
sin, trauma of what was passed down. And
Yeah.
so, did you ever try talking to your mom about why she says the things that she says? Not that it would have helped any, because
Yeah.
I am sure narcissists do not have any sort of idea of what they're doing, or
Right.
maybe if they do, they feel justified and don't think
Right.
there's anything wrong.
I've tried to address it in my own way, in a safe way. So for me, it was through writing an email, a
Okay.
lengthy email of what I wanted to see in our relationship and what I didn't want to see in it any longer. I was trying to not be attacking,
Yes.
but being a person with a lot of grace and just saying this needs to change in our relationship for us to be able to move forward together. And it worked for a year.
Okay.
But then a year later, to almost the day, she told me she didn't want that relationship anymore that way. She didn't like
Okay.
the ball in my court or the boundaries I set up. She
Okay.
wanted what we had before. But what we had before was very unhealthy. It was very toxic.
Yeah, you weren't going back to that.
So I tried, and I tried in other ways. But having a face-to-face conversation with her about this, it wouldn't be able to go forward.
You couldn't get anywhere.
You couldn't get very far. So,
Mm,
because she, had the habit of exploding.
right.
And so, again,
Yeah.
I want to make sure that I don't want to walk into an unhealthy situation. So I did my best to communicate and
just to preserve your relationship,
yeah.
you
do what you can, and yeah.
But it's ultimately that person's decision and choice if they want to change.
Yeah, if there was a time where she was, because she's never apologized to me for anything that she's done, and she's really harmed me, as well as others in our family. But she's never been able to say, I am sorry, or come to a place of any kind of repentance, even with the Lord in it.
Right.
She felt it was her right, as I guess a parent, to treat us any way that she desired, because she's the mom and we're the child, so she can do anything she wants, and it's okay. And I'm supposed to allow that to happen and overlook a lot of things. And because there's the fear of facing self within a narcissist, they're trying to cover up all of that shame that they have.
Okay.
So they haven't really understood grace from the Lord.
Right.
In my observance. And they're living in that shame. So they have all of these internal voices that tell them why they're not good enough, why they're not loved, and all these lies from the enemy. And so they haven't faced that. And like you said, it makes your heart grow cold.
Right.
Because you're trying to like live life, pushing down these things that they're battling in their mind, and then trying to hold themselves together, but at the same time lashing out at people to regulate their emotions. And it's just these patterns that keep on going and going and going. And it'll look different in different individuals. So if people can't relate to what I'm sharing, they could probably relate to other tendencies that are out there. There's like lists of them on the internet. It's kind of easy to find.
Well, I mean, I think I've shared with you that, one of my parents, they have a narcissistic personality. And what I've realized is that a lot of times, they'll point out the mistakes in other people.
Yeah.
And they're very self-righteous.
Yes.
Like,
yes.
everybody does it wrong, but I'm the only one who does it right, kind of thing.
Yes, that's a very telltale sign of a narcissist. Yes, because it makes them feel good about themselves if they can find the wrong in other people.
Oh my gosh, I know.
And they'll size themselves up with other people really quickly. So there's a lot of a competitive spirit that comes with it.
Comparisonitis is
huge. But it's not a healthy competitiveness. There's also jealousy. That's something else that I really faced when I was married and doing things that the Lord had put on my husband's heart to do and my heart to do. My mom was actually very jealous of that. And so when I would share information with her, this is what we're going to do, there wasn't the response of that you would think.
Yes, like she would be so proud of you that y'all were, willing to,
Now she might verbalize it, but you can feel that what you're saying and what I'm feeling and seeing in your facial expressions and in your behavior, it's like conflicting. And I knew that very well growing up. And so that's the covert part. I'm going to say the right thing, but I'm going to actually mean something different. And if you're in tune with that, you can feel it. You can feel it. Right. And then you can see it in other behavior. So it'll come across as they're going to just stare at you. And you're like, okay, this doesn't feel comfortable at all. And they minimize your achievements or successes. So if I said, I've done this, well, your other sister did something better. Or, this other person outside of the family.
Right.
Let's all,
better.
talk about this person for a long time because let's minimize your successes. Let's minimize what you're doing because it makes me feel bad. And let's make you feel small so that I can feel better about myself. And that gets exhausting over time with a parent. A parent that's supposed to be the most supportive.
Yes,
but
yes.
They can't be supportive.
Would you say that your mom knows the Lord, or
I can't make that overall call with that. That's between her and him. I do believe a part of her does know the Lord. I think there's a part of her that genuinely, loves him. But at the end of the day, I can still be praying for her to know the Lord the way that most people do know him.
Right.
Because he changes you.
Right.
He changes you from the inside out. He changes your heart. And he pulls all those ugly things out. And so when I don't see change,
Right.
then I don't see fruit of the Spirit. Then I don't see
Right.
evidence of it.
Right.
So yeah, I still sometimes I'll hear the Lord, prompt me to pray for her.
Right.
Either it be her to know Him or to, heal her.
Oh,
Whatever.
I know, Amanda. Just from my experience walking this, for the last several decades as well, it's like, you don't need to make it any harder than it needs to be. I mean, the Lord knows everything anyways. He's just
Right.
waiting for you to just fall on your face, confess and repent, and He will forgive you and He will start changing you. And so,
I
but
just had a thought as you were talking. Sorry, I interrupted.
oh, you're good.
One thing that I had to learn is if I continue to allow her behavior to happen against me, I would actually be enabling that behavior.
True.
And so for a narcissist, if you build a relationship with them again, even if you don't address those things that need to be addressed, they'll think you've forgiven them, but their understanding of forgiveness is to continue to treat you any way they want.
Okay.
The slate is clean, but I'm going to still repeat the behaviors. And obviously the Word of God says different about,
Right.
when you ask someone to forgive you, you turn away from that behavior and you try to, make a difference. But the Lord was revealing to me, He's like, as you let her treat you this way, you're enabling her behavior. She's never, ever going to have to face herself.
Right.
Because then you're just kind of feeding into her patterns and saying it's okay for her to walk all over me and never allowing her to just.
But it's hard though, Amanda, especially if you are with them during the holidays and you
all that extra pressure
with extended family and everybody knows, she's the one with the issues and people are walking on eggshells. And when you do try to defend yourself, it doesn't ever go well.
Right. So,
know.
There's some terminology with narcissism. There's, I think it's called gray walling, where you don't respond in any emotion.
Oh, okay.
So if you understand how the narcissist mind works, which I've done so much research on it, it's kind of ridiculous how much I've researched it, but they're looking for a rise out of the other individual so that they can feel better and above the other person. So if they see that they're getting under your skin, it makes them feel what they're looking for.
Oh, I see. Okay.
So if you gray wall them, I think it's called gray wall. Excuse me if it's not the right word. Gray wall, I think.
But yeah, stonewall or something.
Yes. Yeah. So if you don't show them an emotional response, and it's just pretty flat emotionally, you're still, being respectful and responding in the way that you need to, but you don't show that it really agitates you. They get no rise out of it and they get bored and then they stop.
Right.
Some of the time they stop.
Right.
And then they don't know what to do because you're not feeding into it, and then they can't come back at you, and then it turns into what they want, which is a huge argument.
Right.
If they can get into an argument, that helps regulate their emotions because now they can take out all of that negativity that's in them, dump it on somebody else, and then they're fine. And they walk away while the other person is just sitting there broken and upset. So the best response is no response emotionally.
Okay. That's good.
It's hard, but you can practice. I mean, you could practice it with other individuals in your life, and you can say, okay, and say something negative to me, and I'm just going to respond with something that shows no emotional response.
Right. So how do you, I can't imagine being able to not respond without any, emotion, especially if you haven't been healed and you get triggered by what is said. So you really do have to work on the past offenses and being able to let that go and forgive. And
so I went through a lot of counseling. I went through trauma therapy as well because one counselor told me that she was destroying my soul. And he spoke into words what I knew. but someone else on the outside of me validating what I knew was very, very helpful. And then the Lord used that to help me walk out of the relationship at that time for myself to continue to move into healing, especially from the post-traumatic symptoms that I was showing at the time. So I went through what's called EMDR.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
don't know the acronym of that, but that trauma therapy brought me to a place of facing those experiences that really either created core lies within me that I had to uproot. And I had to face a lot of that. And the Lord was really with me in it. It took about a year and a half for me to get through some of those really intense memories. Coming out of it, though, it kind of, the Lord pieced me back together from those experiences and really brought healing. And then I was able to be at peace with, this is who she is and this is who I am. And I can't change her and I'm not going to try. So my expectations for her to provide me what normal people would want, which is that motherly, nurturing love.
Close relationship.
Yeah. I don't expect that from her anymore because she cannot provide it.
Right.
And she can't provide it because honestly, it wasn't really provided to her. And so when I saw that and saw the generational part of it, I was able to be okay with it. And then when my expectations for her to behave a certain way was gone, she started behaving the way that she normally does behave with those traits of narcissism. It didn't emotionally impact me as much anymore.
Good.
And I just thought, this is, her behavior, and I'm okay with it.
Well, I'm glad that you realized during that year and a half of EMDR, it wasn't easy for you because it brought back all the memories from the past that were not pleasant. But I think with anything, the Lord wants us to do that. He wants us to go back to those times when we've been deeply wounded. And it is a part of us that we don't want it to affect who we are on the inside. And so he has it come up to the surface because then he exposes the huge lie that it is. And you realize you're just like, I'm not the problem.
Right.
And
it took me years to figure that out.
Yes, I know. And there's so many young women, and I'm sure men as well who struggle with that because they're still carrying all of that, the stuff from childhood.
They are, There's a majority of the people are still carrying that.
Yeah, I don't think most people actually have wanted to deal with their baggage. I think most people like to carry their baggage and, try not to be seen and, ignore it and it'll go away kind of thing. And,
it's scary. It's scary to face pain that you've tried to escape for so many years. But what I learned is, along with EMDR, the Lord also walked with me, in my healing process. So like you said, lies would surface, which is good. But the lie was always attached to an emotional wound that was created by the trauma of the narcissistic person.
Yes.
And so I would have the Lord just kind of show up in my times with him, and he would just be there, and I would sense him there, and then I would cry and cry and cry.
Right.
And I'm like, what's going on, Lord? And he was like, I'm bringing that healing.
Right.
So all of that pain that we stuff down, we're just scared for ourselves to feel it.
Right.
We're scared of that. But once we feel it and allow it to come all the way out and like process, then there's a release from it. There's a huge release from it. And then you just are like, oh.
Right.
You just healed me, God.
Right.
This is amazing. And then you're free from whatever that pain was holding you down at. So I got to a place of complete desperation before I did find out about EMDR. I didn't realize I needed trauma therapy. I had been to counseling, but trauma therapy is a whole different thing. And when I realized it, my first thought was shame. Like, oh, I'm more broken than I realized. And how can you use me, God? I'm messed up. I am messed up. Now I have to heal from trauma. And it was like the Lord, he was very kind and he was very gentle. And he was like, it's your process. Be okay with it. You're going to come out of it and you're going to be whole again. You're going to be healed.
Right.
And then I can use you to help other people realize that
Right.
it's okay. Yeah, it's a little scary.
Right.
And it's opening up some wounds that you have, covered for many years. But
Right.
like going to a doctor, you got to get it taken care of or it gets
Yeah.
infected.
Right.
And it causes other issues in other parts of your body.
Right.
It affects your relationships around you.
Mm-hmm.
And from pure desperation of not wanting to deal with depression anymore, I was tired of struggling with depression. I had struggled with it, I think, since probably middle school.
Oh, wow. There was a
Because
direct correlation.
Yeah,
Because
all of it was
you
connected.
were not valued as a child and were told
Yeah.
so many things that were derogatory that,
Well, mostly it was,
I
had one parent keep another parent out of my life for many, many years. But I was able to reconnect with my biological father in 2020. But because one parent kept out another parent for no really good reason, it also caused a lot of heartbreak and issues as well. But it makes you think, if my father doesn't want a relationship with me, then I'm not worth
Well, you have,
anything.
it's abandonment issues, I'm sure,
So
but
it's just a whole bunch of
realizing just the toxicity of that whole relationship. And so I like what you said about, if you've got these wounds inside of you, that it is going to fester and it's going to affect the relationships that you have. And it also affects your relationship with the Lord too.
Yeah, it can. Yes.
Yes. And so, and I think you knew, I started abortion recovery several years ago in Tyler. And so when we walked the women through their healing Bible studies, they have a lot of PTSD symptoms, and it's frightening to see how that secret can shut somebody down so much and rob the joy of your life because you're covering up that shame and guilt from that past abortion that you told yourself you were never going to think about ever again.
Right.
And it's just a total lie from the enemy.
Exactly.
And so I know that you are doing healing studies now, right?
Yes. I wrote my own booklet.
Yeah.
My own inner healing ministry booklet. My ministry is all about inner healing. And so
that's great. Anchored in Christ.
Anchored in Christ. And it's a very simple 6-week class. It's not so invasive. It's a very pure kind of type of setting. So it gives opportunity for individuals to understand one, symptoms of depression, symptoms of anxiety, and if they have trauma in their past that they need to recover from. Because a lot of people are just not aware that there's things that need to be taken care of, and this will kind of get them kind of a viewpoint or just a window into their own heart.
Yeah.
And then they can decide if they want to go further after this 6-week class and get counseling themselves. I'm not a counselor. I am a mental health certified coach, but not a counselor. And so I can provide them resources to have counseling, or even if they're ready to tackle the trauma.
Okay.
But this is to help what I needed when I was walking through this journey. I just needed something simple to help me understand just the simple concepts with mental health as well, and how your brain was built to protect you. It wasn't built to hurt you or to harm you. And God, uses it in ways that, we didn't think was possible. So there's a reasoning for suppressed memories. There's reasoning for why I remember this experience worse than it possibly was. But then just talking about, the impact you have in other people's lives if you don't get healing, and what simple healing is with just bringing it to the Lord, bringing it to Jesus. So it's a very biblical perspective, biblical take with it.
Yeah.
And we first look at an individual in Scripture who I believe struggled with some type of mental health issues. For example, one of them is David, King David. Obviously, the Psalms shows that he was in despair at different times and crying out to the Lord for help, and teaches us how to lament to God in a healthy way.
Right.
So then it's a way of learning how to allow those emotions to process in a healthy way
Mm-hmm.
and not to pull you into a place where you can't come out of that pit.
Right.
And emotions are a gift from God that we have. We can't be upset with ourselves if we have anger or if we have sadness or if we have grief. We need to see those as gifts from the Lord, letting us know there's something wrong that we need to take care of.
Right.
And so
Right.
it's a fun class. It's not a fun experience as you're going through it, but building relationships with other individuals who are willing to be open and share their stories. And sometimes that's where it brings healing, is when people share their stories with other people.
And you see the healing that happens
Yeah.
in these participants that
Yeah.
come through. You know, they have a lighter load when y'all are done.
Yeah, they realize, oh, I don't have to do this alone.
Right.
A lot of times the enemy wants to isolate individuals.
Right.
My first response of learning about narcissism was isolation.
Mm-hmm.
So I want people to realize that if you're struggling with depression, lots of us do struggle with that at different times. If you're
Right.
struggling with anxiety or panic attacks,
Mm-hmm.
you're not the only one.
Mm-hmm.
It's okay to talk about it, and really to break down those barriers where we feel like, as Christians, I shouldn't be struggling with my mental health or,
Right.
emotional wounds.
Right.
But I think it's healthier to say, I am struggling. I need people to pray for me.
Right.
And to tell me what resources I can have to move forward in healing.
Right.
And not be ashamed of it.
Right.
So
Right.
I was ashamed of my struggles with depression. So I wouldn't tell people. I didn't even tell my own husband.
Yeah.
Bless his heart. I put on a good face because growing up, I
Wow. Okay.
learned how to hide emotion,
Mm-hmm.
because you can't have emotions.
No, that's
and
not healthy.
that
I
kind of-
know. Right. But you're miserable inside,
But
but
you
you
are.
look perfectly
Yeah.
normal and fine on the outside. And so,
Yeah.
so would you say that the Lord's delivered you from the depression now?
Yeah. I'm going to
Okay.
say I believe 110% that he has healed me.
Okay.
So when I started my journey of healing, it started for me back in like 2015 when we came back from serving overseas.
Mm-hmm.
And I experienced also really bad burnout. Like, it was
Yeah.
not healthy. And so that started my journey, and it took several years of going back and forth to counselors, not always consistently,
Mm-hmm.
because you think, I'm okay now.
Yeah. Yeah.
I've got this figured out. How many times I've told myself that, and then I would run into it again. But I always self-reflected. Like, I always
Good.
said, Lord, this isn't normal
Mm-hmm.
to feel this way on a Saturday, every Saturday,
Right.
with depression.
Right.
This isn't normal to have this much anxiety when I go out in public. And I would use my husband as a way for me to know what's normal and not normal, because he has no mental health issues. So I would ask him, are you just sad any time of the day? It just comes and hits
Right.
you like a wave. And he's like, no. So this isn't normal.
Right.
He's like,
Yeah.
no, it's not normal. And so,
Yeah.
because when you grow up with it, you think this is how everybody lives.
Feels.
Everybody feels. Like, I thought everybody would have a Saturday or a Monday and they are just under the cloud consistently, not just once in a blue moon, but like
Right.
every week.
Right. Right. And so, well, it's good that you recognize that emotion, those negative emotions that he brings up
Yeah.
in us, they do point back, and you have to
Yes.
reflect on,
Yeah.
is there a core root of this is
Yes.
happening that's
Yes.
still there that
Yes.
needs to be uprooted,
Yes.
because it's going to rear its ugly head again.
Yes. So, and I even talk about this in my class. And so it's a really good reminder to myself as well. Anytime I get triggered about something,
Mm-hmm.
don't ignore that.
Mm-hmm.
Like, sit down with God and be like, why was I triggered when someone said this, or I walked into a certain area and I just had this emotional response to it? And if I really want to know the answer, the Lord will tell me.
Well, I wish I had this conversation with you 10 years ago, Amanda, because,
Well, me too, with
my
myself.
kids, they're all grown and gone now, but I still remember times when I acted just like a total, turd.
Yeah,
Like,
me too.
I had a response of like, are you 3 years old or what? But like, I couldn't get myself out of it. And so maybe those were the times I need to think back now and say to myself, maybe it's something from my childhood, from that relationship that is still within me that made me have that prolonged negative response to whatever the kids had done.
Yeah.
And, I always apologize, but it would be like several days later. And it would be a lot of,
But you apologized.
I did,
I think
and
that's great.
struggling with the Lord and going, why do I feel so mad or angry, or why didn't they do it this way?
Yeah.
And so yeah, it's starting to make sense that maybe it's because of the environment I grew up in, and
Yeah.
that's why I acted the way I did. Not that it's an excuse.
Right. It's
but
not to justify the behavior. It's just to understand where it came from,
Right, and I don't
so you
wanna
can
have
heal.
that. I don't wanna
Mhm.
do that again to my
Yeah.
kids,
Yeah. Yeah.
and so
That's a very good, healthy thing.
yes, because, I've always said that they're gonna have their own baggage, they don't need mine, and,
Yeah.
and so but yeah, that is very good, just to be very self-reflective,
Yeah.
and I think people are scared with that, but if they understand that, you're sitting there with Jesus, and
Yeah.
he's the most non-condemning person, and he loves you, more than you love yourself.
Yeah.
And, he wants you to get real with what has happened to you
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
pour your heart out to him,
Yeah.
and that is when the healing
Yeah.
does begin. So yes, tell us a little bit about the resources that has helped you through the years.
So I was blessed to learn about this lady that's a psychologist, Dr. Ramani,
Mhm.
and I have her book with me today. It's Not You,
Uh-huh.
Identifying and Healing from Narcissistic People. I didn't get my hands on this book until it came out. I think it was last year or a year before,
Okay.
but that's a good resource to start reading. And if you're being triggered while reading it, that's
Uh-huh.
a sign that you need healing.
Right.
And don't continue reading it if it's too triggering. Like, I don't want people to
Right.
harm themselves, because sometimes there's things that we walk through that are bigger than us, and we need outside help in the form of a
Okay.
counselor or
That's good
a
advice.
therapist. Because I had a book one time that I read, and it triggered me into having panic attacks.
Okay.
And it was about mothers, and I don't remember the title of it, but
Mm.
it was good, but it wasn't good for me at the time. So
Yes.
Dr. Ramani does have a YouTube channel,
Okay.
and she discusses a lot about narcissism, and she's not a believer, but she has such an understanding and a way to explain what
Mhm.
is going on so you don't feel crazy, because a lot of times people who are the victims of narcissistic abuse, they
Mhm.
feel like they're going crazy because of so much gaslighting,
Mhm.
so much manipulation, so much control. And one of my because of what I came out from under,
Mhm.
I don't like being controlled. Like, that's a huge
Yes.
thing with
Right.
me,
Right.
because I had to live under control for so
Right.
long. Or I don't like when people gaslight me and make me feel like I'm crazy and tell me something
Mhm.
different, just so that they can be in control.
Mhm.
But she gives a lot of help. There's another individual on YouTube as well. I think his name is Dr. Lester,
Mhm.
and he gives his perspective as well. So you have different takes from different individuals, and I think it's healthy. I do want to say that when you do start to research this, to give yourself breaks,
Okay.
because it can be so heavy on the heart and the mind, especially if you're not healed. And it can make you a little like too obsessed with it, and
Okay.
then your world can get a little bit rocked. So take it in small doses.
Okay.
Small doses. Allow yourself time to understand, time to heal, because you don't want all of that stuff to be going in your mind and heart all of the time. It's not healthy for you physically.
Right.
It is
Right.
not healthy. So take breaks, allow yourself,
Mhm.
like, okay, I'm going to try to understand this within this next year instead of this next week.
Yes.
So that's kind of
There was
what
a
I did.
lot. Right. There was a lot. So, Amanda, would you say for those who are married into a narcissistic relationship, could imagine that would be a lot harder. Not necessarily, you can't really compare parent and
Right.
child and spouse to spouse,
Right.
but you have different challenges there
Yeah.
from, being faithful to your spouse, honoring them, and,
Yeah.
raising the family and all that. I guess if you are in a narcissistic married to a narcissist, then is to really seek help for yourself and understand, like,
Yeah.
the dynamics of that relationship and,
Yeah.
realize what you can or cannot change
Right.
about it.
Right. I think I can't speak into that because my husband is far from being a narcissist.
Narcissist, yes.
But that's the gift that God gave me to help me get out of
Yes.
that relationship with my mom. I did go to a support group of other women that were in narcissistic marriages, and some of them did get out of them. And
Mhm.
so, they could definitely speak into this a lot more than myself. But I will say, for your own sanity, to get some kind of counselor to help you walk through life if you have to remain in that relationship for
Okay.
any reason.
Right.
And that counselor, I feel like, needs to understand narcissism because not all therapists and counselors understand
Okay. Okay.
what a narcissist can do to a person. They can cause people to go crazy. That's almost happened to me. Like, I literally thought I was going to, that was one of my greatest fears, was becoming insane. And the Lord pointed that out to me, and another lady came up to me and said, "You're not going to go insane." And that was prophetic, and that was God telling me, "I see what you're afraid of, Amanda, but you're not. I'm not going to let your mom
Right.
make you feel like you're going to go insane."
Right.
So within the marriage relationship, there's always boundaries you can set up, and
Mhm.
you want to really protect the children. I feel like, obviously, I
Yeah.
grew up in it as a child, and really explain to the children their worth, their value, that they
Mhm.
don't need to be that punching bag to
Mhm.
make somebody else happy.
Mhm.
That's not their role. That is not their worth.
Mhm.
Their worth is in being a creation of the Lord, and just really nurture those children in that dynamic. And if you feel like you have to walk away, to find support first before you do,
Mm.
because you're gonna need that. A lot of narcissists, if they're really like, if they're very strong into their traits, they can really want to do revenge and try to ruin your reputation. They're very
Mhm.
they want to hurt. And like, when I
Okay.
first walked away from my mom, she bad mouthed me to all of the people that I grew up with, and so I can't even go and visit those people. They
Yeah.
all think that I am the
Okay.
traitor and the villain, and I've come
Okay.
to a
Yeah.
point of being at peace with it, as I'm okay if people don't like me now, because I'm free
Yeah.
and I'm happy. I still do communicate with my mom a little bit, but the boundaries are very strong, and it's only
Okay.
because of my grandmother, and I don't like it.
Okay.
But I'm at a place where I can keep that
You
boundary
can
firm.
you can handle
I
it.
can handle
You
it.
can handle
I don't want to, but
little parts of it, but
yeah,
and so
yeah,
and I know that you had mentioned your sisters and all that. They're not
yeah,
quite there. They're still walking. God's still writing their healing story
yeah.
from that relationship as well.
I think I'm the oldest and the firstborn. I'm also from my mom's first marriage, and I think it meant I was treated a little bit harsher and different.
Mhm.
Um, I'm not saying I'm special or anything apart from them, because they have been through their own experiences, and I don't want to tell their story, but I will say the Lord has definitely used me
Mhm.
and by his grace, strength and bravery to set up boundaries and to walk away, to impact them and their choices.
Right.
They're still in relationship. Again, I can't speak to their stories. I really want to respect them, but I do know that, yeah,
But you have a
I made an
really
impact.
but you're still close to your
Oh
siblings.
yeah,
And
we're very
you're
close
and
because we had each other growing up.
and they know
So
that you were there. They
yeah,
know that you are
yeah,
further down the road, and one day, the Lord will get them there because,
yeah,
you don't need to be set into a prison,
Mm-mm.
on this side of heaven,
Yeah,
for nothing you ever did wrong,
exactly, exactly.
and so,
Yeah,
but yes, I definitely, applaud you for just looking into all of this, Amanda, and understanding it,
thank you.
and really walking with the Lord, and having him over the last 10 years just continue to for you more. And now he has birthed this ministry that you
Yes.
love,
I
helping
love it.
other women
I love it.
walk through that because, it may not be a narcissistic relationship. It's some other sin
Mhm.
struggle that we battle with that God wants us free as well, And so,
Exactly.
so tell the listeners how they can get a hold of you.
Okay.
And we will
So,
have, we'll have it up on the show
okay,
notes.
that's great.
But
I
yeah,
I do have a YouTube channel under my name, Amanda Barbe, and I have an email address that if anybody has questions, they want to join one of my classes and they're in the local area, I would love to have you. My email address should be provided for you guys, but it's amandareneebarb@gmail.com. Renee has 2 E's in it. And you can find me on social media under that name. And yeah, I would be happy to really meet with anybody for coffee.
right.
One of my favorite things is meeting with individuals one-on-one because I'm actually very introverted. So I love the one-on-one experience with people, and I love listening to people's stories and just hearing,
Yeah.
what they've walked through. And I'll be the empathetic listener that
Yeah.
I needed for a long time. My husband was very good at that too.
Yes.
I probably talked his ear off.
Well,
So
he sounds like a gem.
oh, I love him.
He
Yeah.
sounds like a gem.
Yeah.
So, the Lord also gave me a wonderful husband as well, Amanda. And so
That's nice.
John and I, we'll be married 31 years, I think, this summer. And
Oh,
so,
congratulations.
I grew up in a household where there wasn't any verbal affirmation. And so when John and I first got married, his love language is physical touch and words of affirmation, which I
Oh.
totally am terrible at because I never did any of that.
Yeah, you have to learn those things.
You do have to learn those things. And so, so yes, I am very grateful that God gave me a husband who gave me what I've always wanted, but, ultimately, it's with the Lord that he's the one that heals and restores and makes our life new. And so, but anyhow, thank you so much for being on the show today.
Thanks for having me. I did want to share one more thing that
Sure.
I feel like the Lord's placed on my heart. One of the individuals in scripture that the Lord used to help me really make sense of what I walked through and not to allow that to drag me down, because we can become very self-focused and victim mentality,
Mm-hmm.
was the story of Joseph in Genesis, where he was betrayed by his family.
Yes.
He was very much betrayed by his family, and then later on continued to receive that betrayal through Potiphar's wife, and then ended up in prison, and then ended up forgotten for 2 years before the Lord used him in a position that would save the future nation of Israel.
Right.
And so God showed me there's going to be purpose in all of this. And so those that are listening and you're walking through it right now, God will use it because he's so good at that, of taking what we've walked through that doesn't make sense in the moment, that we didn't choose this, but God is sovereign over all of it, and he will bring it out and turn it around for his glory and our good.
Yes.
And we can rest in that. That's found in the book of Romans. But that's been my lifeline since I discovered what I was really struggling with, and that it would be a long struggle. And I have seen just the Lord restore and restore and restore things back into my own personal life. Not necessarily the relationship with my mom, which is the sad part, but he's allowed me to have healthy relationships with those around me that like your husband are loving and kind and affirming. And so that's the one individual, if you're like, man, my life is hard, why?
Right.
There's a reason.
Story of Joseph. He was treated very unfairly.
Yeah, he was. And so,
but
God,
God, he, what the enemy meant for
yes,
evil, God meant for good.
Yes.
And
yeah,
God had a plan even despite all of that, so. But anyhow, thanks so much, Amanda.
Thanks
I
for having
appreciate
me.
you. So, well, today that wraps up today's Getting Real to Heal with Dr. Grace. And please, if you enjoyed this episode, please comment and like and subscribe to our YouTube channel, Deep in the Heart Ministries. And we will see you the next time. Bye now. Thank you to today's show sponsor, Express Employment Professionals. They are the leading staffing agency in East Texas, and they have helped thousands of businesses and companies find the right employees. If you are somebody that's looking for a job, Express Employment Professionals can also help you. Go to expresspros.com. That is expresspros.com. If you liked what you heard today and you want these Jesus stories to go out into the world, please consider giving to deepintheheartministries.com. You can also get a hold of me at grace@drgraceenglish.com.